The galaxy had long been ruled by an unspoken truce, an unshakable balance of power between the mighty Aslarn Empire, the cunning Vrix Collective, and the ruthless Thalka Dominion. Each empire had its strongholds and its war fleets, and while conflict between them was frequent, none dared upset the existing hierarchy. A long-standing peace of sorts prevailed, a peace enforced by overwhelming power. But on the edge of the galaxy, something was stirring. The Aslarn Empire had never known fear. Their colossal warships, like metallic leviathans, dominated the stars, and their fleets could wipe out entire fleets of lesser civilizations with a mere flick of their commander's hand. The Vrix Collective was no less imposing, a technologically advanced species that saw strategy and cybernetic warfare as an art form. The Thalka Dominion, known for their relentless bloodlust and unmatched warrior culture, instilled terror in their enemies with the mere mention of their name. Yet all three of these empires found themselves stunned when an anomaly was detected by one of the galaxy's most powerful observatories, an unprecedented rift in space, far beyond the known boundaries. The event was almost ignored at first, dismissed as a malfunction or a natural occurrence, until the scanners picked up something more. The rift had changed, expanding, pulsing with energy. And then it opened. From the rift, a fleet appeared, gleaming black warships with sleek, angular designs. Their silhouette was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. At first, there were only a few ships, tens, maybe hundreds, but soon more emerged, far more than anyone had predicted. These were no ordinary ships. They seemed to flicker and shimmer with an unnatural glow, their hulls seemingly able to warp and shift with an otherworldly smoothness. The military factions of the galaxy were quick to respond. The Aslarns scrambled their closest fleet, preparing for what they assumed was a rogue invasion, likely from a distant and primitive species that had stumbled upon advanced technology. The Vrix Collective dispatched their cybernetic legions, ready to hack and overwhelm whatever threat had appeared. The Thalka Dominion sent an elite strike force, eager for a fight. But the humans were not a simple threat. The first battle took place in the Zaranth system, a strategic trade hub where the human fleet made its arrival. As the galaxy's forces converged, they underestimated what they faced. The human fleet, though smaller in number, was guided by an intelligence and precision that confounded the invading forces. The Aslarn fleet, renowned for their raw power, struck first, launching wave after wave of devastating attacks. But the human ships were nimble, swerving, darting, and weaving with such unpredictability that the Aslarn gunners couldn't hit a single target. Then came the surprise. The humans retaliated with lasers so concentrated they disintegrated entire warships in a single strike. The Aslarn flagship, Leviathan's Fury, was hit by an energy burst so intense that it tore a hole through its hull and ignited its core. The once mighty vessel was reduced to nothing more than debris in the vacuum of space. The Aslarn fleet faltered, struggling to comprehend how a species so young could possess such devastating power. Meanwhile, the Vrix fleet, attempting to hack into the human ship systems, were met with an eerie resistance, an unbreakable firewall that scrambled their best efforts in real time. Their ships, some of the most advanced in the galaxy, were helpless against the humans' cutting-edge technology. But it wasn't just their firepower that stunned the galaxy's fleets. It was the tactics. The human ships moved like a swarm, striking from all directions in coordinated waves. They were relentless, and there was no predictability to their approach. The enemy ships couldn't form their usual defensive formations because the humans had figured out how to keep them off balance, attacking with lightning speed and precision. Within hours, the once proud Vrix fleet had been decimated, and the Aslarn ships were retreating in disarray. The Thalka strike force, who had arrived in the midst of the chaos, hesitated, unsure of how to respond to this unexpected, unyielding force. The humans had made their mark. News of the destruction rippled across the galaxy. For the first time in centuries, the old powers were on edge. They had never faced an enemy quite like this before. The balance of power had been shattered, and the galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had arrived. The Zoranth system was the first to feel the full force of humanity's unexpected arrival, and it would not be the last. As the aftermath of the cataclysmic battle unfolded, the galaxy's leadership scrambled to comprehend the unthinkable. The Vrix Collective, renowned for their technological prowess and cunning, had suffered a crushing defeat, one so swift and brutal that it sent ripples of fear throughout every power in the galaxy. The Vrix High Council convened in secret, and even their finest strategists were left in stunned silence. For the first time in eons, the galaxy's unchallenged empires were left wondering. What if humanity wasn't just a passing storm? What if they were the future? Across the galaxy, the military leaders of the Islarn Empire, the Thelka Dominion, and others were already on high alert. They knew one thing for certain: the Vrix, usually so efficient in their methods of warfare, had not been defeated by conventional means. The humans, whoever they were, had fought with ingenuity and ferocity, leaving entire fleets disintegrated in a matter of hours. Something had shifted in the balance of power, and no one knew how to stop it. The first major meeting of the galaxy's leadership occurred just hours after the fall of the Vrix fleet. The galaxy's leaders gathered at a secret location, far from prying eyes. With their empires now under threat, they agreed on one course of action: a united front. The Islarn dispatched their warships, the most advanced in the galaxy, to the Zoranth system. The Thelka, ever the warriors, sent their fiercest legions. The Vrix, humiliated but desperate, offered to contribute whatever they had left. Their pride had been shattered, but they understood the stakes. The humans could not be allowed to continue their rampage. On the eve of battle, the galaxy's fleet arrived in the Zoranth system. Hundreds of ships, organized and prepared, loomed in the cold void of space. It seemed like a foolproof plan. After all, the combined might of the Islarn, the Thelka, and the Vrix was unparalleled. They would destroy the human threat once and for all. But they were about to learn that they were far from prepared for the brutal reality of facing humanity's war machine. Admiral Ethan Cross, the enigmatic leader of the human fleet, had been watching from the shadows. His fleet was outnumbered, but it was equipped with technology and strategies that no one had anticipated. The humans had studied their enemies in depth, learning their strengths, weaknesses, and tactics. Now, it was time for the galaxy to feel the consequences of their underestimation. The battle began with the sudden arrival of the human fleet, emerging from behind a nearby asteroid belt. The galaxy's fleet expected them to engage in a traditional line formation, but instead, the humans scattered. Hundreds of small, heavily armored ships darted across the battlefield, moving with lightning speed. As the enemy ships fired in futile attempts to strike down the humans, they found their targets evasive, seemingly anticipating every movement. The Islarn's massive battleships unleashed their full arsenal, but the humans had a counter, energy shields that absorbed and redirected the blasts, using them to charge their own weapons. The human ships retaliated with pinpoint precision. Laser beams and missile volleys slammed into the Islarn ships with surgical accuracy, igniting the largest of their vessels in fiery explosions. Whole fleets began to crumble, and panic spread like wildfire. The Vrix, meanwhile, tried to use their advanced hacking techniques to compromise the human fleet's systems. They deployed cybernetic agents that infiltrated the human ships' networks, but to their shock, every attempt failed. The humans had anticipated the Vrix's tactics, and their ships were equipped with a quantum encryption system so sophisticated that it rendered Vrix hacking tools useless. As the battle raged on, the Thelka's warriors, unaccustomed to retreat, found themselves outmatched by the humans' unconventional strategies. The humans' coordination was flawless, their attacks relentless. The Thelka, who had once dominated entire star systems, could not keep up with the rapid tempo of the human assault. Their ships were picked apart in close combat, their boarding tactics easily countered by humanity's own elite boarding teams. By the time the dust settled, the battlefield was littered with the wreckage of once proud fleets. The Vrix, broken and demoralized, fled the system. The Aslarn and Thalka, who had been certain of victory, were left reeling. Their fleets, once the most powerful in the galaxy, lay in tatters. The news of the defeat spread like wildfire. The galaxy's great powers were left in a state of disbelief. Humanity's first strike had shattered their defenses and left them wondering how such a young species could possess such staggering power. This was no fluke. This was a new reality. Admiral Cross had sent a single message, broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. This is only the beginning. Prepare yourselves. The galaxy had learned a brutal lesson that day. Never underestimate humanity. In the wake of humanity's sudden and overwhelming victory, panic spread like wildfire across the galaxy's great powers. The Zarenth system, once a bustling hub of commerce and peace, had become a graveyard of shattered warships. The Vrix fleet, so sure of its technological superiority, had been reduced to floating wreckage, and the Aslarn Empire, whose own vast armada had suffered catastrophic losses, found itself scrambling to regroup. For centuries, the galaxy had followed an unspoken rule. The three dominant empires, Aslarn, Vrix, and Thalka, held the power, and their influence was unquestioned. But humanity's first strike had upended this carefully maintained order. The events in Zarenth were only the beginning, and now, as the galaxy reeled from the loss, the leaders of these ancient civilizations were left to confront the reality of their worst fear. A species, unknown and unheralded, had arrived with the power to destroy them all. In an effort to restore order and devise a plan of action, the great powers called for an emergency session of the Galactic Council, a once untouchable body that represented the interests of the galaxy's most powerful factions. Representatives from the Aslarn, the Vrix, and the Thalka gathered in a secure station located in the neutral sector, far from the chaos of the front lines. For hours, they debated furiously. The first proposal came from the Aslarn Empire, whose leadership had been humiliated in the battle. Their military strategists, who had once been considered the best in the galaxy, had no answers. The human fleet had struck too quickly and too precisely. They suggested an immediate counterattack with every remaining warship the Empire could spare. The Aslarn generals were furious, insisting that they could push humanity back if given a chance. But even they could not disguise the tremor of doubt in their voices. "We cannot afford to underestimate them," said Commander Tavar, an esteemed Aslarn tactician. "We must adapt, or we will fall." The Vrix delegation, meanwhile, was consumed with embarrassment. Their reputation as masters of cyber warfare had been shattered when their best agents failed to infiltrate the human systems. The Vrix ambassador, high strategist Thilrax, struggled to mask his desperation as he proposed a different approach. A new alliance, perhaps even an offer of peace with the humans. They were untested, and their defeat of the Vrix fleet might have been a fluke. Perhaps an opportunity existed to win them over before they became a threat. "We must learn from them," Thilrax argued. "Perhaps there is some technological advantage they possess that we can exploit." But the Thalka Dominion was already prepared to abandon diplomacy. Their warriors, bristling with indignation, saw the human threat as an insult to their very existence. The Thalka had always been the ones to strike fear into the hearts of their enemies, not the other way around. Now, their fleets had been routed with alarming speed. As the largest and most brutal faction in the galaxy, the Thalka could not stomach the idea of yielding, not without a fight to the bitter end. "It is not enough to seek peace. They will destroy us all if we do not act swiftly," snarled High Warlord Jaker, the most respected leader among the Thalka. "Let us gather our strength, unite our legions, and teach this upstart species the meaning of power." The room erupted into heated debate as the representatives of the three factions shouted over one another, each side pushing its own agenda. Some wanted to strike immediately, others suggested negotiation, and still others questioned whether a direct confrontation was even possible anymore. And then, in the midst of the chaos, a transmission arrived from an unexpected source. The message was short and chilling. "We are not interested in peace. You will either submit or be destroyed." The message was broadcast across the galaxy, and though no one knew exactly who had sent it, the words were clear. Humanity was not a faction to be bargained with. They had no interest in a galaxy divided into empires, no desire to be part of the old order. The galaxy's great powers stood in stunned silence. It was no longer just about military might or grand strategy. The rules of war had changed. Humanity, it seemed, had rewritten the playbook entirely. The council session broke down into a fractious, disorganized mess. The idea of forming a united front against humanity seemed more and more impossible. The factions could not even agree on a course of action. Some were too afraid to engage in further battle. Others were too proud to bow down. In the aftermath of the council's collapse, whispers began circulating, rumors of an even more dangerous truth. Humanity had not just come to the galaxy to fight. They had come to reshape it, and the galaxy's old powers were no longer prepared to handle the storm humanity was about to unleash. As the council's delegates disbanded, one truth became painfully clear. This was no longer just about war. This was about survival, and humanity was playing by its own rules. The chaos of the Galactic Council's failed meeting echoed through the halls of every empire. The Aslarn, Vrix, and Thalka were divided, paralyzed by their own indecision. They had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt and fight, and now they were left to grapple with the consequences of their ignorance. The galaxy's old powers, once dominant and feared, found themselves on the back foot, and they knew it. But humanity wasn't waiting for them to make up their minds. The fleets, commanded by Admiral Ethan Cross, continued their relentless campaign. The Aurora, the human flagship, moved from system to system, striking swiftly, without warning, and vanishing just as quickly, leaving behind only destruction. The humans' tactics were as unpredictable as they were devastating, and it didn't take long for the galaxy's powers to realize they were being outmaneuvered at every turn. The first major operation to demonstrate humanity's tactics occurred in the Reichel Rift, a heavily fortified system controlled by the Thalka Dominion. For centuries, the Thalka had held this system without challenge. Their fleet was massive, their defenses impenetrable. They boasted an armada of dreadnought-class warships capable of laying waste to entire fleets in a matter of hours. And yet, when humanity arrived, the Thalka found themselves caught completely off guard. Admiral Cross had learned everything he needed to know about Thalka tactics. Their ships relied heavily on brute force and direct combat, using their powerful weapons to overwhelm enemies in concentrated assaults. They were formidable, but they had one glaring weakness. They relied too much on their strength, and not enough on flexibility. They had never encountered an enemy who could outthink them on the battlefield. As the human fleet entered the Reichel Rift, the Thalka were ready. Their massive warships took position, ready to engage in a full assault. The humans, however, did not approach head-on. Instead, they scattered, sending small groups of ships into different sectors of the system. These ships were decoys, designed to attract the Thalka's attention and draw them into traps. But it wasn't just the decoys that were dangerous. The humans' real ships were scattered within the asteroid field that surrounded the rift, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The Thalka, eager for battle, took the bait. Their fleet broke formation and gave chase, leaving their rear unguarded. This was exactly what the humans had planned. Admiral Cross unleashed his attack. From the hidden positions within the asteroid field, the real human fleet struck with pinpoint precision. They deployed specialized anti-shield missiles that bypassed the Thalka's formidable defenses. These missiles, unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, were designed to latch onto the enemy's shields, destabilizing them and allowing for focused laser strikes to penetrate their hulls. Within minutes, the Thalka ships began to fall, their once impenetrable shields failing as their systems went dark. The human fleet's true power lay in its intelligence. While the Thalka's forces concentrated their fire on the decoys, the humans knew where to hit and when. Their attacks were methodical and merciless, targeting critical systems and disabling the Thalka ships before they even had a chance to retaliate. The few Thalka ships that attempted to regroup were quickly overwhelmed by coordinated assaults from all sides. Within hours, the once mighty Thalka fleet had been decimated. The survivors fled in disarray, leaving their home systems vulnerable for the first time in centuries. The scale of the victory was staggering. The Thalka had not been defeated by firepower alone. They had been outsmarted, outmaneuvered, and broken in a way they had never anticipated. It was a lesson the galaxy's other powers were learning the hard way. Humanity wasn't just another empire to be crushed. They were a species that had come to conquer not with overwhelming force, but with a new brand of warfare, one rooted in cunning, deception, and surprise. Admiral Cross's reputation grew even more legendary in the wake of the Reichel Rift victory. His unorthodox strategies became the stuff of myth, a testament to humanity's ingenuity. The galaxy's great powers, having failed to unite in a coherent response, now saw their old strategies and tactics rendered obsolete. Humanity had exposed their weakness. Their reliance on brute force and overwhelming numbers had no answer for a smaller, more agile, and smarter opponent. Across the galaxy, the question began to take root in the minds of every military strategist. What happens when we can no longer rely on the old ways of war? The answer, they were beginning to realize, was simple. Humanity had already answered that question. The Reichel Rift victory marked the beginning of a new era, one in which humanity's rise seemed unstoppable. The destruction of the Thalka fleet was not just a military triumph. It was a statement. The galaxy's once feared empires now faced an enemy that didn't just strike from the shadows, but created those shadows themselves. Humanity had turned war into an art, and the galaxy's powers had no response to it. As Admiral Ethan Cross's fleet pushed forward, leaving the remnants of the Thalka dominion in their wake, something far more terrifying than their firepower emerged: their relentless and unwavering determination. The humans were not just fighting for conquest, they were fighting for something far greater: their place in the galaxy. To them, this was not a war for territory or resources. It was a war for survival, and they had no intention of losing it. Across the galaxy, the once formidable empires scrambled to regroup, but fear was beginning to seep into every facet of their leadership. The Vrix Collective, still reeling from their previous defeat, decided to make their move. But their thoughts were not on confrontation. They were on self-preservation. With their technology failing against humanity's superior encryption and defenses, they had only one choice: retreat. The Vrix sent an emissary to the galaxy's other powers with a simple proposal: form an alliance or perish. The Aslarn Empire, once the beacon of might in the galaxy, was now on the defensive. Their warships, which had once crushed entire civilizations with ease, had been torn apart by the humans' unpredictable tactics. Still, the Aslarn pride ran deep. They would not bow before humanity. Their generals were certain that they could rally the remaining forces to mount a counteroffensive, but even as they began to mobilize their fleets, they knew the truth. This was no longer about numbers. It was about adaptability, intelligence, and the ability to think one step ahead. And the humans had mastered that art. The Thalka, meanwhile, had completely collapsed in the wake of their defeat. They were a warrior culture bound by honor, and the loss at Reichel Rift had shattered that honor. The idea of submitting or seeking an alliance was anathema to their very existence. The Thalka leaders, driven by a singular rage, declared their intent to fight until the last ship was destroyed. They believed their warriors could never be conquered. Yet the brutal truth was beginning to sink in. Their warriors, their tactics, and their entire way of life were obsolete in the face of humanity's cold, calculating brilliance. Throughout the galaxy, the mood shifted. Once proud fleets now lay in ruin, their commanders unwilling to accept that they were facing a threat they couldn't overpower. The galaxy's remaining forces, led by the Aslarn, Vrix, and Falka, realized the terrifying truth. Humanity wasn't just outclassing them in battle. They were breaking the will of their empires, and with every defeat, humanity's reputation grew. On the fringes of the galaxy, a new movement began to take shape. A growing number of independent worlds, those not aligned with the traditional empires, started to see humanity not as a threat, but as a savior. Many had grown disillusioned with the old powers, ruthless empires that had dominated them for millennia. The humans offered something these planets hadn't had in centuries: freedom. They weren't interested in empire building. They weren't interested in domination. They were interested in winning, surviving, and bringing down those who had held the galaxy in an iron grip for so long. Humanity's message was clear: join us or be swept aside. And slowly, more and more systems began to align themselves with the human cause. While the Aslarn, Vrix, and Falka bickered and fought amongst themselves, humanity's influence spread. The galaxy's power balance was no longer determined by the oldest and most established empires. It was now defined by the upstart species that had shaken everything to its core. The reign of fear was upon the galaxy's once great empires, but it was not their enemies they feared most. It was the humans, whose rise now seemed inevitable, who haunted their every thought. And the question on every leader's mind was no longer if humanity would conquer them. It was when. The galaxy's powers were dying, and in their place, humanity was rising, step by step, with each decisive strike leaving nothing but fear and the cold promise of an inevitable, unstoppable march forward. The galaxy had begun to fracture in ways the old empires never thought possible. In the wake of humanity's devastating series of victories, the once mighty Aslarn, Vrix, and Falka found themselves teetering on the brink of collapse. The war wasn't just fought in space anymore. It was fought in minds and hearts, as the political and psychological toll of humanity's rise grew ever more pronounced. On the capital world of the Aslarn Empire, a last bastion of hope for the galaxy's former hegemonic powers, the mood was grim. The once proud imperial city had become a place of constant debate, infighting, and fear. The Aslarn generals, having suffered crushing defeats, were divided. Some still held to the belief that with enough resources and strength, they could turn the tide. But others, those who had witnessed firsthand the rapid unraveling of their military might, saw only one path left: to surrender or risk total annihilation. In a quiet chamber deep beneath the capital, the Aslarn High Council met. The atmosphere was heavy with uncertainty. The Aslarn Empire had been built on the belief that their dominance was unchallenged. But now, as they looked at the shattered remnants of their once mighty fleets, they knew the truth. Humanity was a force they couldn't contain. Councillor Kethan, a hard-nosed realist and seasoned strategist, was the first to speak. "We can no longer fight this war as we once did. Our fleets are broken and our territories are crumbling. Humanity fights with strategies we cannot predict, and their ability to adapt is unlike anything we've ever faced." Another councillor, high-ranking General Loreth, stood. "You would have us surrender to these humans. Our honor is not for sale. We will fight to the end." Kethan's eyes narrowed. "Honor? Do you think the humans care about honor? They care about survival, and they will destroy us unless we change our approach." The Falka thought they could fight them head-on, and look where they are now. The Vrix tried to outsmart them, and they failed. We must be prepared to make a difficult choice. The room fell silent, the weight of Kethan's words sinking in. The cold truth hung in the air. Humanity was not a typical enemy, and their technological advancements were so far beyond anything the Aslarn had ever encountered that it was impossible to imagine defeating them with conventional tactics. The old guard was losing their grip on the galaxy, and a new power was emerging in its place. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the Vrix collective had come to the same conclusion. Their once mighty fleets were scattered, their homeworld in disarray. The idea of an alliance had failed spectacularly. Now their only hope was to survive, and for survival, they needed an understanding with humanity. The Vrix, ever the pragmatists, secretly sent emissaries to humanity's forces, requesting a meeting. They knew they couldn't win a war against humanity, but perhaps they could secure their place in the galaxy by offering an uneasy peace. The emissaries arrived on the human warship Victory's Edge, the flagship of Admiral Cross. They were met by a cold reception. Humanity's terms were simple: unconditional surrender and a promise not to oppose them in the future. In exchange, the Vrix would be allowed to continue their existence, but only as a subservient power, no longer a threat to humanity's dominance. The Vrix delegation, composed of their finest diplomats, protested. "You would turn us into a vassal race. After everything we've built, we cannot accept such a fate." Admiral Cross, unflinching, spoke plainly. "Your alternative is extinction. Humanity didn't come to destroy you. It came to survive. But if you wish to challenge us further, we will end this. Your choice." The Vrix were silent, contemplating the decision. The message was clear: submit now or face complete annihilation. In the end, they had no choice. The terms were harsh, but they were the only way to secure the Vrix's future. A quiet surrender was agreed upon. Meanwhile, the Thel-Ka Dominion, proud and broken, had taken a different route. Still reeling from the destruction of their fleet at the Reichel Rift, they had retreated to their homeworld, their capital planet a fortress brimming with warriors. They refused to bow, to submit to anyone, even humanity. But humanity was patient. They didn't need to destroy the Thel-Ka immediately. Instead, they began a long campaign of psychological warfare. The humans made their presence known, sending small, fast ships to infiltrate Thel-Ka space, ambushing isolated fleets, and striking when least expected. These hit-and-run tactics wore the Thel-Ka down, eroding their will to fight. Humanity didn't need to engage in another battle. They simply needed to break the Thel-Ka's spirit. And it worked. The Thel-Ka leaders, once defiant, began to splinter. Internal dissent rose as different factions within the Dominion realized that the humans' methods were far superior to anything they had ever known. Slowly, the Thel-Ka leadership began to fracture, and when Admiral Cross sent his final message to their council, a direct demand for their unconditional surrender, the last of the Thel-Ka warlords saw no way to fight back. In the span of just a few months, 3 of the galaxy's most powerful and ancient empires had been brought to their knees. The Aslarn had lost their fleets and their will to fight. The Vrix had been forced to surrender, their technological edge no longer a guarantee of dominance. The Thel-Ka had broken under the strain of humanity's methods. Humanity had not just conquered territory or fleets, they had conquered the spirit of the galaxy's old powers. The reign of the old guard was over, and the rise of humanity was inevitable. With the final defeat of the Thel-Ka Dominion and the reluctant surrender of the Vrix Collective, the galaxy began to shift in ways no one had anticipated. Once the strongest and most fearsome empires in existence, the Aslarn, Vrix, and Thel-Ka had been humbled. Their militaries shattered, their political systems crumbling under the weight of their losses, they could no longer maintain the power they once wielded over the galaxy. And as each faction fell, a new force began to rise from the ashes. Humanity's influence spread with terrifying speed as they deftly filled the vacuum left by the collapse of the old order. No longer were they the underdog, struggling for recognition. Humanity had made its mark on the galaxy, and now the galaxy had no choice but to bow before them. Admiral Ethan Cross, the man who had led the fleet through victory after victory, had become an icon. The galaxy's surviving leaders, no longer able to resist humanity's sheer momentum, turned to him for guidance. With his tactical genius and unyielding resolve, humanity's position seemed unassailable. He was the face of this new era, a symbol of human strength, ingenuity, and unrelenting will. The political structures humanity established were simple but effective. an alliance of worlds united under the banner of the human species, each bound together by mutual defense and prosperity. But at the center of it all, humanity's iron grip held firm. The former empires were left in the rubble, and their remaining worlds had two choices: join humanity's coalition or face slow extinction at the hands of this unstoppable force. Some of the independent systems that had once lived in fear of the galaxy's major factions now found themselves considering the benefits of aligning with humanity, seeing the opportunity for peace and prosperity under their new rule. For the first time in millennia, a truly unified galaxy began to emerge, though it was dominated by human leadership. Earth, the cradle of humanity, became the new capital of the galaxy. No longer just a small, relatively insignificant planet, Earth was now the heartbeat of a new interstellar empire. The once proud leaders of the Aslarn, Vrix, and Falca, now mere satellites in this vast human network, could only watch as humanity remade the galaxy in its image. But not everyone was ready to accept this new reality. Within the ranks of the defeated empires, there were whispers of resistance. The pride of the Aslarn was particularly fierce, as their people struggled to reconcile their humiliation. Some clung to the dream of reclaiming their place as a dominant force. The Vrix, too, found themselves resenting their subjugation, quietly working on new technologies that might one day allow them to challenge humanity's rise. However, these whispers of rebellion were no match for the overwhelming might of humanity's fleet, whose presence now stretched across every corner of the galaxy. The galaxy's new rulers had forged alliances with former enemies, converting them into allies with strategic advantages. Every star system now had a role in humanity's growing empire, from the production of advanced technologies to securing vital resources. Humanity's grand vision was becoming clear to all. The galaxy would no longer be a place of constant war, chaos, and shifting power. It would be a place of order, of progress, and of prosperity, under humanity's leadership. Admiral Cross's vision had begun to take shape, not as an empire founded on bloodshed, but as an empire of innovation, justice, and unity. He spoke often of a future where all species could thrive under one banner, united by the will to survive and evolve. His words inspired a new generation of leaders, those who had once been on the sidelines, watching as the great powers of the galaxy clashed and burned. Now they had a chance to make a new future, a future where humanity's might was tempered by reason, and where old grudges were set aside in favor of a new common purpose. But while humanity's victories seemed endless, one thing remained constant: their enemies had not forgotten. The fires of resentment still smoldered in the hearts of those who had been defeated, and some would stop at nothing to see humanity brought low. As the first truly human-led council convened to oversee the future of the galaxy, the questions began to emerge. How would humanity handle the responsibility of leadership? Would they become the benevolent rulers they promised to be? Or would they, too, fall victim to the corrupting power that had consumed every empire before them? The galaxy was now in the hands of humanity, and the dawn of a new age had arrived. But as history had shown time and again, no reign lasted forever. The balance of power was always shifting, and though humanity had won the battle for the galaxy, the war for its soul had only just begun. The galaxy was quiet, too quiet. The weight of humanity's dominance had pressed upon the once powerful empires, forcing them into uneasy submission. For months, peace reigned. Systems that had once been at war now flourished under the new order. Trade routes opened, technological cooperation grew, and the specter of old conflicts seemed a distant memory. Humanity, under the leadership of Admiral Ethan Cross, had created an empire built on pragmatism, unity, and an unwavering commitment to survival. But peace was fragile, and every empire, no matter how broken, carried its pride and its hunger for revenge. In the far reaches of the galaxy, whispers began to spread. A new coalition had formed, though it was a shadow of its former strength. The remnants of the Thelka, the last factions of the Vrix, and even a few disgruntled Aslarn warlords had secretly united, fueled by resentment, and the desire to reclaim their lost power. They were few, scattered, and disorganized, but they were not without resources, and they were determined to make one final stand. The group was led by a man who had once been the pride of the Islarn fleet, General Zephyr, a tactician whose reputation was built on victories against all odds. He had survived the fall of his empire and seen the rise of humanity's dominance as nothing short of an insult. In his mind, humanity's existence as the galaxy's ruler was a temporary aberration, an interloper on what was supposed to be the natural order of things. General Zephyr, a strategist of unparalleled cunning, knew that to defeat humanity, he would need to exploit their one weakness, their overconfidence. He had watched them carefully, studied their methods, and learned their habits. What he saw was a species that had won countless victories, yes, but had never faced a true coalition of their greatest enemies, united with a singular purpose. Humanity's most dangerous flaw, he concluded, was their belief that their enemies had been utterly broken, that the old empires no longer had the will or the means to resist. But Zephyr knew better. He launched his campaign with the same tactics that had brought down the Thalka at Reichel Rift: guerrilla warfare, surgical strikes, and sabotage. A series of coordinated raids across border systems caught humanity off guard. Ships vanished without a trace, communication lines were severed, and vital supply chains were disrupted. For the first time in years, humanity found itself on the defensive, scrambling to respond to an enemy that used their own methods of warfare against them. The galaxy's fragile peace began to unravel. Systems that had once eagerly accepted humanity's rule began to question their safety. The idea of rebellion, once unthinkable, now spread like wildfire. Even some of humanity's own allies began to doubt whether the promise of peace was worth the cost of being under human control. Admiral Cross knew that this moment would come, that there would always be those who refused to accept the new order. But what he hadn't expected was the speed and effectiveness of the coalition's resurgence. It was as if the old powers, defeated and humiliated, had been waiting for this very moment, biding their time in the shadows. Now they had reappeared, with new resolve and vengeance in their hearts. In a high-security meeting on Earth, Admiral Cross convened a council of humanity's greatest leaders, each of them faced with the same question: how could they respond to this unexpected threat? Cross sat at the head of the table, his mind racing through every possible course of action. He had built an empire based on unity and strength, but this challenge was different. The coalition of the old empires wasn't just about military might. It was about ideology, about a galaxy that refused to bow before humanity's rule. If humanity was to survive this, they would need to do more than defeat their enemies in battle. They would need to show the galaxy that their reign was not about domination. It was about survival, prosperity, and unity. "There's only one way to end this," Cross said, his voice steady, though the weight of the situation was heavy. "We must show them the future we've promised, not just through force, but through the strength of our vision. We will unite the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as leaders of a new age." The words echoed through the chamber, but as the holographic images of humanity's leaders flickered in the air, a sense of foreboding lingered. The storm was gathering, and even as humanity prepared to fight back, they knew that this was no longer just a battle for territory or control. This was a battle for the soul of the galaxy. In the coming months, the conflict would reach a boiling point. Humanity's enemies had gathered their strength for one final push, and the galaxy would once again be thrust into the flames of war. But this time, the stakes were higher. It was no longer just about survival. It was about proving that humanity's rule was more than just the hammer that had shattered the old powers. It was about proving that humanity's vision could be the guiding light for the galaxy's future, a future that was truly unified, where the mistakes of the past would not be repeated. The old guard was not dead, and the storm that had been gathering on the horizon was about to break.